Tried and convicted, Harvey Weinstein is convicted again for assault and rape. More on the case that sparked a whole movement to protect survivors of sexual abuse. Plus, a platform with purpose. I speak to the first openly bisexual Miss USA delegate, Rachel Slauson, about her journey. And we'll take a look at how Harry and Meghan's next Netflix project will spotlight leaders. Welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. We begin in Los Angeles, where a jury has convicted Harvey Weinstein of rape. The jury convicted Weinstein of 3 out of 7 charges. He could face up to 24 years in prison. He already is serving 23 years for a similar conviction in New York in 2020. But that state's highest court has agreed to hear his appeal. The exposure of Weinstein's horrible actions spurred a movement around the existing #MeToo and the Time's Up movements, which led to more conversations about workplace harassment and sexual assault. An important public safety alert from the Justice Department warns of financial sextortion schemes targeting boys. The government says at least 3,000 minors have been victimized so far this year. According to the DOJ, predators use social media to start communicating with a minor, primarily boys ages 14 to 17, but sometimes younger. Then they will move the conversation to a different platform where they can direct message. Victims are tricked into providing explicit photos, and then the perpetrators demand money. And they threaten to release the images to family and friends. According to the department, at least a dozen victims have died by suicide as a result of these crimes. Rising to the top of the pageant world is no easy feat. Doing it as a member of the LGBTQ+ community makes it even more difficult. That was until Rachel Slauson became the first openly bisexual Miss USA delegate in the competition's 70-year history. She won as Miss Utah in 2020, winning in a state that can be unforgiving toward queer people. But her journey came with many trials, mental health issues, homelessness, and job loss. I caught up with Rachel about her journey, her organization Feelings Are Human, and more. Hey, welcome, Rachel Slauson. Thank you for being here with us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, you made history as the first openly bisexual Miss USA delegate, and I wonder if you would just give us a little bit of background about your experience with pageants and how you came into that to begin with.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Utah, which is a very religious state, if you haven't heard. And so for me, pageantry was something that really just allowed me to express myself. And it was one of the few places where wearing a bikini was actually celebrated in my state.
Mhm.
Whereas, modesty and other cultural values are, really important there. So for me, it just was a place where I felt a little bit more free to express myself, a little bit more free to be who I am. So that's what drew me to it in the first place. But it actually took me 7 years to win. I competed literally every year for 7 years. And finally, after I decided to come out and decided to accept myself on a whole other level for who I am, that's when I finally won. So pageantry was really like a journey of self acceptance for me.
Yeah, well, wonderful. I am congratulations on, getting to that point where you were able to come out. And I wonder, would you talk a little bit about what that was like to be in that pageant world as an out person and how that was received by, either judges, the fans, other contestants?
I was definitely terrified that women would feel uncomfortable around me. I think there's sometimes a little bit of a stereotype there that if you're into women, that you're into every woman. And that's just not the case for me at all. It's really about a deeper emotional connection with someone for me. So I can be around beautiful women, and that doesn't mean I'm attracted to them. But even if I was, there's still just things like respect and consent and basic, human principles that I think sometimes just get lost when people hear that you're queer.
Yeah.
And so I was definitely really scared that women wouldn't want to be my friend or wouldn't feel comfortable changing around me. But I actually found that really wasn't the case. I mean, I'm sure there were people that thought that way, but I never encountered them or met them. And honestly, I was, really supported and encouraged to just be myself by friends, by other contestants, by the judges. That's part of why I think I won, because they, saw that I was standing up for myself in a new way. So yeah, I think there was a lot more acceptance than I was prepared for.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Great. You also use the platform to highlight mental health issues, which is so crucial for LGBTQ plus people, especially, even lately with all of the onslaught of laws against us. And it's just always been important. It continues to be important. Would you talk a bit about using your platform to highlight those issues?
I think that's honestly part of why I brought my sexuality into the conversation at a pageant because, Utah is ranked still, I think, in the top 5 states for suicide, and the most at risk are queer youth. So I was one of those queer youth. I tried to end my life a couple times in my teens, and so firsthand I knew how important it is to talk about mental health. And part of the reason things got so bad for me is that I had so much self judgment and I was so afraid to talk about it that's what led to me ending up in a hospital. Whereas if I had just asked for help, it wouldn't have gotten that bad. So that's part of why I dedicated my life to making sure that nobody else ever felt that kind of shame and felt like they could just go to a doctor and that there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, thank you for sharing that story with folks. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind, what were some of the early steps that you took to coming into yourself, so that you could feel whole and move past that difficult time in your life?
Well, if I'm being honest, I really struggled with that for many years. It's not like I was the perfect poster child of mental health. If anything, I was the exact opposite. But when I was 23, I ended up homeless, and that was a direct result of the deterioration of my mental health. I really was not okay for a couple months there. And I think that's when I realized, the fact that it got to that point, that nobody was going to come and do this for me. So I had basically two options to, stay homeless, stay imbalanced and mentally unwell, or to start taking care of myself. So at that point in my life, I made a commitment to myself that self care was going to be my number one priority. My mental health was my number one priority. And I adjusted my entire life around that. I stopped partying, I stopped hanging out with friend groups that weren't healthy for me. I changed my whole life based off of that rock bottom moment. And I think that that's really what helped. It's not like I was just always good at it. I really had to face myself in the worst moment and recognize that I was the only person that could fix that.
Well, thank you for that. And I wonder, would you share a little bit about what you're currently working on in terms of getting your message about mental health out in the world?
Yeah, so when I was Miss Utah, right after I was crowned, the pandemic started. So I realized I was probably not going to have the traditional year of going around and speaking about mental health. So I started hosting online group workshops that just kept growing and growing. It's called the Feelings Are Human program at this point. So I do group workshops. I also do retreats, and I also do public speaking, like corporate events, really helping people educate themselves on suicide and mental health. So many people want to help and support others, they just genuinely don't know how. So, with that information, they have the ability to actually be a support system to those who are struggling. And most of the people that I work with are also struggling with their mental health. I've even supported therapists, social workers, people that actually feel sometimes too much pressure to ask for help because they're in that space. So I really create those safe spaces, mostly for queer women to come together and be vulnerable and heal.
Thanks so much to Rachel for stopping by. Using her platform to provide visibility for others is a beautiful thing. For my full interview with Rachel, open the Advocate channel on YouTube. Harry and Meghan will be exploring the lives of leaders who've paved the way for others in a new Netflix series. They were inspired by Nelson Mandela's legacy. Live to Lead will highlight the values, daily disciplines, and guiding principles that leaders use to enact change and inspire hope. The docuseries will feature some of the biggest names in leadership today, including Brian Stevenson, Gloria Steinem, Greta Thunberg, Jacinda Ardern, and more. It will even include an interview with the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Harry and Meghan serve as executive producers of the 7-episode series. It will begin streaming on December 31st. That's all the time we have for this Advocate today. Advocating for all is our mission. For more content and coverage, from politics to entertainment, open the Advocate channel wherever you stream. You can also visit us online at advocatechannel.com. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. I'll see you next time.